Today, we're going to talk about embracing darkness and spirituality. And we're going to talk about the fact that we kind of shy away from talking about darkness. We don't just shy away from it in the spiritual realm, but our society doesn't really want to talk about darkness. They turn away from it. We have all these movies that we watch that have violence. They might have drama, and they have some dark themes, but we don't really talk about it as a community, and it's not something in our culture where we teach our children to think about darkness and what it means and that human condition. When we know there's darkness, we accept kind of passively that there's darkness, but it's not something that we really address. And this isn't about something like in the spiritual world, the dark night of the soul. That's important. It's something that we should talk about, something that is important to people that are walking a spiritual path. But just because you have this dark night of the soul and that might be talked about in spiritual realms quite a bit, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about the darkness that's in the universe and the darkness that we're kind of all a part of. And I don't want this to be a negative thing. Like I'm a positive person, guys. I really love the light. If someone asked me what my most important guiding value is, I would say loving kindness. And so I definitely appreciate the light, but I still think we can have a conversation about these dark things out there. That takes me to the fact that we're the balance, I think. We talk about, if you look at the yin and the yang and you look at Taoism and the way of the Tao, you've got the light on one side, you've got the dark on the other side. And we're kind of walking that path in the middle. That's the way, the balance of the universe. And if we're that gray middle line and that's where we're walking, we have a choice about where we look. Do we look at the dark? Do we look at the light? And even though our society might not talk too much about darkness, we know that people dwell on darkness, right? We have ourselves dwelt on darkness, or we have friends or family members or spouses, maybe even children, that dwell on darkness. That's where their focus is. They're walking this line in between, but they feel like they're a part of darkness or they're lost to it. But because we don't talk about it, there's very little perspective when we get lost in it. That's this terrible thing. We get lost in this darkness, but we don't have any perspective. There's no roadmap. There's no sign to kind of get us out. And so I think if we can see ourselves as the balance, at least we know that the base part of our compass is going to keep taking us back to that balance in the middle. And that should be comforting to us. That should be kind of this warm thing that, okay, I don't have to get lost in the darkness, and I don't have to get completely even lost in the light. There's this balance in between. I can choose to look at the light. I can choose to live my life kind of looking over in that direction. But at least I know I have a compass and I can always turn to it. It's really important. And we have this darkness around us, right? The darkness of the universe. There's the darkness of society, our communities, people, relationships, all this stuff out there. And that's like this external darkness. And it's important, something that we should acknowledge and come to terms with. And then there's also the darkness that's inside of us. This is also really important. And I think this is even less talked about. I mean, we kind of acknowledge there's darkness in society, right? Even if we don't have great conversations about it. But the darkness within, I think we talk about that even less. And so that's something we really have to come to terms with. I'm a positive person. I'm a kind person. And I try to do right by myself. I try to do right by the world around me. And I can still say there's a dark thing in me because I'm part of the universe. I am that. I am the universe, right? Like this universal kind of pantheistic oneness. But that means that there's also that balance of darkness in me, even if I value loving kindness, even if I value finding joy in life. I was a soldier. I've talked to you all about that on this channel in multiple episodes that I've done. And it's not easy to have been a soldier sometimes because you think, okay, I saw darkness. I had darkness that I was on the kind of receiving end of. But I also took part in darkness. I was part of the U.S. and the Western military industrial complex. And even though I thought I was doing the right thing and I was saving lives or protecting my fellow brothers and sisters in arms or whatever it was, we were doing some evil stuff. And you might be doing it for the right reasons, and I use air quotes there, but you're still doing darkness. You're part of it. And I think it took me a while before I could fully come to terms with that. I think the longer, I spent 12 years in the deserts of Kuwait. I was in Baghdad for over 18 months. I was in Kandahar for over 6.5 years. And yes, I started to see, it started to wear on me, that darkness. You start to see, oh man, this is dark. I'm a part of it. And it wears on you. And I kind of got lost in it. And then when I came home, there it was. So I think if we acknowledge that we have darkness inside of us, then again, that helps us have perspective on the whole, which is light, dark, and the balance in between. And so I'd encourage each of you to think about the light. Yes. Think about, is there a part of me that I need to get in touch with? I don't think you surrender yourself to the darkness. It's not at all what I'm saying, guys. This doesn't mean we have to go out and be bad. It doesn't mean we have to go out and let it control us or let it define us. It's just that it's part of the definition of who we are, even if it doesn't define exactly who we are. I think there's a distinction that we can make there. As you're walking your spiritual path, and we're all walking our own journey, it's going to be fiercely unique and individual to each of us. What does darkness look like to you? What darkness has impacted you externally? Think about the things that have happened. This bad thing has happened to me. I've had this trauma. I've had this bad relationship. I've had this bad job. I've been stuck in this thing over here for so long. I'm tired of it. Think about how those dark things impact you. And I come to terms with it a little bit. Write things down. You can journal about it. There's different things that you can do to kind of work through this. There's meditation. I think, we've got videos here on this channel about how to better meditate in a way that works best for you. And getting in touch with those feelings of things that have happened to you, those dark things around you, is important. And then it always comes back to me to those two big A words. There's acceptance. It's a big thing, right? We have to accept things. When we have this acceptance, the universe makes more sense. The world makes more sense. And there's awareness. And I think awareness is this thing that we have as we move throughout our lives, as we move down our spiritual path. It gets talked about a lot, right? We talk about it in the spiritual community, in the spiritual circles. And awareness can seem like this daunting thing. Oh, I've got to be aware all the time? That seems really tiring. It seems like it would really tire me out. I can't do that. I don't even know how to do that. I don't know how to start. And how do I sustain that? Because it seems like it would take all my energy. And I get that. I've been there. What I would say is, when it comes to awareness, see it as a thing that's going to ease your mind. Suddenly, when you're aware of things, stuff's going to wear on you less, because you're going to be aware of what's happening. You're going to be present in the moment, which is definitely not an overused thing in the spiritual world. It's really important. So when you have this awareness, you're present, and then you know what's happening to you. You're not just letting life happen to you. You're taking control of life. And the reason I'm talking about this now in this episode here about darkness is because if you have that acceptance of the dark things that have happened to you and around you, and you have awareness about things that are going on today in this moment, you're going to have more perspective on where you're at, and you're going to be less tied to the past. You should hopefully be less tied to the future. The future is very uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen, so don't dwell too much on the what ifs. Kind of take them as they come. And so that's the darkness around you. That's the darkness that has happened to you. And again, back to that darkness within, there's acceptance and awareness there. Again, I'm saying it doesn't define us, but it's part of the definition of who and what we are. So if there's this part of you that you don't like because it causes you to feel bad things, it causes you to maybe do unkind things or quote unquote bad things to people, don't run from that. And that doesn't mean that you go and you just surrender to it and accept it, that, oh, I have to be this way. I think acceptance is more of, I accept that I am this way sometimes, And I don't have to let that control me, because I have this value and this belief. So I'm coming to terms with this part of me that is difficult to deal with. And like I said, I don't think we talk about that too much as a society. We don't talk about that too much in our culture and our communities, because it's scary. These dark parts inside of us are scary. And growing up, I feel like we were taught, at least I was, that there's only darkness in these bad guys. There's only darkness in the criminal. There's only darkness in the anti-hero, right? We're very rarely taught that there's darkness inside of us. I think sometimes we're taught it, maybe in some religions. I feel like in Christianity, I was raised Southern Baptist, and obviously not anymore. I'm an omnist or a universalist, but I feel like sometimes we're told, oh, there's darkness inside of you and that'll cause you to go to hell. It's not that, right? So like, that's not really talking about darkness in any type of constructive way. And that's what we're trying to do today, right now, is talk about darkness in this constructive way, where we can say, okay, there's more acceptance around it. There's more awareness around it. We've been on the receiving end of darkness. We've taken part in darkness. So it's both those things. And I go back and think about, not always, but sometimes it's a choice. We make these choices in life. We make choices about where we decide to live. We make choices about what our job is. We make choices about who we spend time with. And these are all things that can pull us into darkness. So I was idealistic as a kid. I wanted to do counterterrorism because I wanted to make the world a better place, right? I wanted to figure out why these people were doing these quote-unquote bad things. So I joined the Army and became a counterintelligence special agent, and I did asymmetric warfare, and I quote-unquote fought the enemy and sent guys on missions to go capture bad guys and drop bombs and all these horrible things. I was putting myself in a situation where there was darkness. I was putting myself in a situation where I was a recipient of darkness. I was a party to darkness. I can say that was a choice. It's not something that I have to dwell on and say, oh, you should have done that. That was my life. That's what I did. It's part of who I am. I have had to accept what I did and who I was. And I now accept that that person is still who I am, but it didn't define me. It doesn't define me, because I'm this person who appreciates loving kindness, and I appreciate joy and positivity. And that's what I want to share with people. And so I debated even doing this episode, because I don't want to dwell on darkness. But again, that goes to the whole point of making this video, is I think we should talk about it. And I think you should talk about it with yourself. I think we should have this conversation with each other. But it really is an internal thing. It really is part of your spiritual path, saying, okay, yeah, there's this dark part of me, and I'm okay with that. And it's not going to define me. It's not going to control me. It's just going to be there. And I'm going to kind of set it off here to the side, and it will be there. And I think that's how we deal with it. It's a process. And it's one that I think we've all probably had like fleeting moments where we think, okay, I've got this part of me that frustrates me, it's kind of scary. And I think the more we run away from it, the more it will control us. So again, that goes back to awareness, acceptance. So you're aware of it, you know it's happening, you accept that it's happening. And then there's intention. Now I'm going to intentionally move forward and live my life in a way that makes the most sense to me, that is meaningful to me, and it's going to be according to my values and beliefs. And this darkness that I know that has happened to me doesn't mean that I can't be this positive person or this joyous person or have this loving kindness in my life. It's just something that is natural. And again, it's part of the universe. The universe is, whether you're, I call the God of many names, or, it's nature, or it's the Brahman of the Hindus, the Tao of Taoism, the way, or it's nature, or it's that self with a capital S. Maybe it's just you believe in your inner self, and that's your divine thing. But for me, that is the universe. And we're all, like I said, it's this pantheistic idea that we're all one, going back to that. It's that idea of, if you go out in nature and realize, oh, I'm not just walking through nature or in nature, but I actually am nature. We are nature. And if you go through that and you you look at what's happening in this beautiful world around us, there's darkness. There's difficult things that are happening out there as part of these cycles. We talk about cycles on this channel quite a bit. Hindus call it samsara, right? There's this big samsara that we're living that's this birth and life and then death and then rebirth. And that's your big samsara, this big circle or cycle that you keep reliving as you learn and are reborn, and you keep learning about spirituality, you keep learning about the universe, and finally you become enlightened and you break out of it and you're done. I think it's a beautiful thing. But whatever you believe, we are kind of in these cycles of things. And part of that cycle is darkness. And like I said, you can go out and realize you're part of nature, and you can see that light and dark around you, from night and day to life and death to swings of emotions of happiness and sadness and grief and joy. All this stuff that I think when you really look at it, especially you walking down the spiritual path, you think, man, this is beautiful. And I can look back and I don't see beauty in the things that I did that were dark, but I appreciate the contrast that it gives to the light that I can see now. And I think that's part of what darkness is. I think that's part of what the universe is. There's no ultimate like humanoid anthropomorphic God, right? It's just the universe being the universe. It's not doing it in a mean way. It's not doing it in an intentional way. This is just the universe existing as a balance. And that gives us, where we have our free will. And our, like I said, it's choices that we make. And so as we acknowledge the darkness within us, as we kind of get perspective on it, we realize it gives us great contrast to the light. And we have this acceptance that it's going to be outside of us and things are going to happen to us that are dark. There's going to be a darkness within us that we have to come to terms with. All that kind of rushes in, and we realize that it's this beautiful spiritual path that we're on. That's when it comes to, I think there's a big letting go, guys, that happens here. For me, I was, after those 12 years in the desert and I came home, I had no identity. I didn't know how to heal. I think time helped. But part of it was acceptance and surrender and letting go. And that frees us, I think, from being held by the darkness, because we think we get attached to these dark things. And so freeing those attachments, not being attached to things, is this process of letting go. And if you can do that on your spiritual path, you're going to lose all this baggage that you're carrying around, which I think is part of the point of our spiritual journey, is we're shedding this baggage that we have. And that's this meaningful thing of, imagine walking around with all this less weight on you, where you can breathe deeply and consistently. You're not anxious, and you're more at peace, and you're more calm. I took a breath just now because it feels really good to talk about that. It feels really good to say that. And I want all of you to be able to experience that for yourselves, and to be able to go out there and be the best version of yourself. Be the version of yourself that is embracing and embodying the values and beliefs that resonate most with you. And I don't want darkness to get in the way. Take some time, maybe write to yourself about darkness, maybe journal on it. And I will acknowledge here, guys, this is not an easy subject for you. And for some of you, it's something that you might not be prepared for or ready for. And I would give yourself grace for that, guys. Just really, really give yourself grace. Say, you know what? I'm not ready for that right now. I'm going to be positive, and I'm going to go on my spiritual journey. I'm going to read this stuff. I'm going to do some work, but I'm not ready for looking at my darkness or facing that darkness in the universe or around me or even inside of me. That's okay. But if you are ready, take that step. We talk about a leap of faith. I don't think it has to be a religious term. That can be a very spiritual term. The faith can be in ourselves. It can be, again, in the universe, or whatever you want to call the divine or the lack thereof. But take that leap. Take that leap for yourself. And when I say self, take that leap for yourself with a capital S, and get introspective. And whatever works best for you. If it's not journaling, if it's not writing stuff down, like I said, it could be meditating. I'm going to go back to that. Meditation is this powerful thing. And remember, you don't have to meditate any specific way. It can be very specific to you. And think about where you are. Think about where you want to go. Maybe it's where you need to go. Where we put ourselves in this concrete world that we're moving through every day, that we share with each other. Where we're putting ourselves very much impacts our spirituality. And it impacts our path and our journey of where we are and where we're going. Think about those things that are happening around you. Again, the things that you do, the people that you spend time with, uh, the content that you consume, whether it's movies or podcasts or books, all of this impacts how you perceive yourself, how you perceive the universe around you. It's going to impact your state of mind. It's going to impact how you view spirituality. So just remember, you kind of are who and what you do and where you spend your time and who you spend your time with. So should be very aware of that. And I don't want to say make good choices because that sounds like a kind of an after school special, but make good choices for you. Make the choices that you need to make. Make the choices that you want to make. And ask yourself, what are those choices? Where am I going? What am I doing? What do I want? What do I need? Have grace for yourself. Always have self-love, guys. Always have self-love as you're moving ahead. And if you love yourself, everything else is going to fall in place. So I really encourage that. And I really hope that you enjoyed our discussion here today. And, let me know what your thoughts are on darkness. Like, I really seriously, I want to know, like, does any of this make sense to you, what I'm saying? Do you have other opinions? You're like, oh, that's a good point, but have you thought about this? I would love to hear that. And I will obviously, for sure, comment back and we can have a conversation. If you like this episode, please give us a like, subscribe by hitting the watermark in the lower right-hand corner. Share out with friends or family if you think they could benefit from this. Maybe you know someone who's having a hard time with darkness, or maybe needs to kind of face their darkness. Share it out and see if maybe it'll help them. And we have a cool community at keyshar.org where we have conversations just like this all the time. If you're interested, go check it out. And I'll say until next time, I wish you peace on your journey.